Great, let's get started. Hello, my name is Johanna Ratliff. I'm an engineer at Pivotal, and this is the first podium of all of the talks I've given at this conference that I can actually see over, so I'm ecstatic. This is leveraging CLI Community plugins. So on the 101 talk, I really wanted to give you all something that leveraged what was already out there from the community and what was already accessible to be built in open source as well. So this might be a similar experience to what you've experienced with Cloud Foundry CLI at any point. You're going, you feel like you've figured out what exactly you want to do to your app, and then the CLI is just not working for whatever you needed. So hopefully we'll be taking you from this to something closer to this. And how are we going to do that? That is going to be CLI plugins. So the huge benefit from CLI plugins is that you're not trapped to what this standard CLI binary looks like. You can extend it for yourself to be whatever you need. So in what scenarios would I want a CLI plugin? Well, first, when you're using any kind of addendum product to Cloud Foundry, any kind of product that might be new to the platform and you want to leverage, or you heard about a cool feature here, and maybe those features aren't already in the standard CLI release. So examples of this might be log cache or metric registrar, which takes some of your app metrics and puts them back into the logging stream. Any kind of syslog drain functionality that you might want from your service that you stood up. And sometimes the Cloud Foundry plugins, or the CLI plugins, just give you a nicer experience than your vanilla API. So for example, I'll show you the log cache plugin during the demo, but there are pieces of that if you're just querying that, or if you're just hitting that API, you're going to get a big dump of JSON, and we can actually make a much better experience for you by taking those 3 or 4 pieces that you're probably going to want to scan first and formatting them. And so that's what we really leveraged our CLI plugin for, and I'll show you that later. And then another time you might want a CLI plugin is when you think, well, somebody else has definitely been annoyed by lack of functionality on this exact same thing. And you're sitting there and you're like, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who needs this. That's a great time to look for a CLI plugin, or perhaps write one yourself, which we'll get to. So things like the log cache plugin, we didn't go ahead and continue with that same CF logs experience. We went and jumped into a more Unix experience. So we said, well, we have the power here, so let's change it from CF logs to CF tail and CF tail follow, because a lot of folks will be very familiar with that terminology, and we just make ease of use, improve ease of use. The Who Am I plugin, one of my colleagues wrote this, and up until, it's been available for a long time, and up until 8 months ago, I would complain and be like, I just want a CF Who Am I? Why is it that hard? Why hasn't the CLI team built this yet? And they're like, there's a plugin, Johanna, there's a plugin. So I went and I got it, and I'm a much happier person now. There are so many plugins that have explanations on your repo plugins command that I'll show you that say, hey, this is just so you can use a wildcard in deploying your apps or deleting your apps. Like, I can do some couple of letters star, and those were like 3 apps that I wanted to do the same thing to, so let's just throw a wildcard in there. Some of the explanations you'll see next to the plugin listings are like, yeah, that is a thing I want. That sounds completely sane. I'd absolutely want that. So anytime you feel like somebody else has definitely wanted this before. Okay, demo time. Come on. we're going to have to exit out of presentation mode really quick. And what if we bump this up? Okay, can you all see this to a relatively good extent? Okay, so let's look at the plugins I have installed right now. So you can see some of the ones I was previously referencing, and they give you the plugin that you do have installed, they give you the version of the plugin, and some of the subcommands that you've been enabled on CLI due to this plugin. So what plugins really do is they give you a broader suite of subcommands enabled. So let's follow the instructions and just do repo plugins as it tells us to, and find out what plugins are available. So a lot of these look really cool, and they're coming from different community members, so they're coming from the people at this conference. Things that, like, do all, run the same command on all the apps in a space, org, globally. You've wanted to run the same command on an app before, so let's make it easy to do it for every single one in a space. Route lookup, find the applications associated with a given host name. And you can see how different levels of admin, or like an admin level versus a developer level off here will play into kind of leveraging these different plugins. But for now, let's give you an example of one of the ones that my team wrote. Let's give you an example of how to add a plugin to your CLI experience. So I know somewhere up there is the log noise plugin, and I'll show you where these are hosted in a little bit, but this really is how easy it is to install a new plugin. Yes, I do want that binary. Give it to me. So it goes out. Oh, yeah, this is speedy. That's good. So it goes out and fetches from the Cloud Foundry community plugins page, where you can say, hey, community, I have a plugin, I would really like to host it here. And that is really what repo plugins is fetching from when it says, here are all of your options. And so you can install a plugin that you've written for yourself. It doesn't need to be hosted on the community page. You can install a plugin and say, install it from this local place. I just wrote it for myself, and try it out. And you can install a binary that you have on your GitHub. You can say, here's the endpoint. Go install that binary. Don't question me, CLI. And it will go and add whatever addendum you've created. This is quite slow. Whatever you've created to add it to your effectively subcommands that you can leverage from just that CF CLI experience. So this is taking a while, so I'm going to say that y'all have seen how to install one, and it's great. And we can just use some of the ones that are already here. So hopefully I'm still logged in. But for example, if I wanted to use my log cache plugin, I could be hitting an API and get a really extensive JSON drop. But instead, I can get some of that condensed information, the things I really care about, cache duration, the number of things stored in my log cache for the apps in my space where I am right here. So as this user, I only have my log spinner demo app, but you can see how this can be a lot nicer of an experience than just full JSON and only being able to hit the API. So if that's ever something that you've written an app that you're like, you know what, I would love to be able to condense some of this information for my own uses, you can also write a plugin and just improve your experience like that. Additionally, let's try CF tail log spinner demo. Look, so many metrics. What a delightful experience. But this is what I was telling you about, kind of tail versus tail follow. We decided that a Unix-like experience was a priority for us. So we wrote subcommands that are tail, tail follow, that are normal for the way we think about a CLI usage. So that's kind of a quick demo intro to how you can start navigating CLI plugins, where that information might be. And then what we're gonna do is pop back to some slides and pull up a couple pages. So I really wish plugin X existed. Well, plugin discovery can be done at that repo plugins command directly in your CLI like we showed, but it can also be, sorry y'all, the Wi-Fi is real slow right now. But it can also be on this page that I will show you when it comes up in a second. You got it. Go, little page, go. Okay. I'll pull it over later. Okay, so this is the Cloud Foundry Community CLI plugins page. So this is where you would want to engage, and you can see to include your plugin in our community repo, please follow the instructions on GitHub. So you can go to their GitHub page through here and say, hey, I'd really like to contribute a plugin back in. Maybe you've written one, maybe you're excited to share it with the community, and have it shown directly on here so that that binary can be pulled down from anybody saying, hey, I'd like this plugin. Additionally, like I said, you can do plugin installs from your own local if you've written one, but I would really encourage anybody who's interested in developing plugins to contribute them back to the community, because so often there's that, oh, I would totally use that experience. Speaking of, I should totally show y'all later the Who Am I experience I was previously referencing. So these are just a couple of the CLI plugins that you probably saw in that repo plugins output earlier. So there is definitely this big scary warning of like it is a binary that to an extent we've hoped will not have malicious actors adding things to the community plugins, but yeah, I would perhaps, if you're interested in a plugin and you don't know who wrote it, maybe go check out the GitHub and make sure it's not malicious. So they're not vetted, but they are a really powerful tool that most of us have successfully used without too much trauma there. So these are pretty good instructions for kind of using your first plugin command. And as previously mentioned, really what plugins do is they expand your grouping of subcommands that you can use for the CF CLI. And you can even host it on CF Community right from the CLI. You can do CF add plugin repo. And you can also list the plugin repos if I think you can add a different plugin repo to say, like, here's our internal plugin repo that we as a company host our plugins on. But that might So, going to developing CF-CLI plugins. This is a lot simpler than you might give it credit for because you do have this really nice interface of just like, I'll pull up probably already have this loaded. Let's go look at the Who Am I plugin that I previously mentioned. Cool. So this is the main.go that Johannes wrote for the Who Am I plugin. As you can see, this main is not huge, but this is literally how you extend and create a plugin. You say plugin usage, and you explain what the command is going to look like. You give it help text, and then engaging with the CLI's already known information is really easy too, because you just say like, hey, I have a CLI connection, get me the current org data, get me the current space data. So the CLI itself is already taking care of all of that user auth and things like that, communicating with UAA and CAPI about all of the specifics there. And then you get to just leverage this add-on power of saying like, hey, can I have a CLI connection? Great, give me the information that you need. And then you can sort it in however way that you need it for the purpose of your add-on or your plugin. So, any questions? Questions about plugins? Questions about writing plugins? Sure. Testing.
It's fine.
Okay.
I guess it's when does a plugin become a CLI?
Yeah, a lot of that becomes engagement with the CLI core team, because certain plugins, like, they don't get just automatically adopted into the core CLI, but it is definitely something that if you have kind of proof that a lot of people are using it, and you can engage with the core team about like, hey, I would really like this functionality in core CF, there are definitely security arguments and such to be made to that team if you're saying, here, look at this big user base. So I think it's on a case-by-case basis. I've only engaged with them about the log cache plugin, about the potential for that. But yeah, I would say it's on a case-by-case basis, but again, they're pretty open to like, look at this proof that people use it. Don't you want it in your core thing? Any other questions? Yeah.
How about programming languages that you can use for writing the CF plugins?
Yeah.
Available there?
Yeah, so I've only ever used Go, but I mean, effectively, it's a binary, right? So as long as you can produce a binary. Josh Gilhoney has written a couple.
Yeah, it actually has to be Go because it does communicate via RPC. So unless you're going to be able to reproduce the Go RPC protocol under the converters, it has to be Go.
Noted. Learned something new today. I assumed that was just my language preferences, but it's apparent that it's everybody's. But Go is a delightful thing to use, so I would encourage you to do that anyway. All right, any other questions? All right. Thanks, folks, for coming to this slightly snappy talk.